I'm Jason Schwartz, your host. This is the Neutral Zone, MauiNeutralZone.com. We are on KAKU 88.5 FM, the voice of Maui. We're also simulcast on Akaku, Maui Community Media, TV. You can also find all our shows up at our website, MauiNeutralZone.com. And, of course, you can go to YouTube because that's where they all live, and you can see them anytime. In fact, I recommend you go up there. You're going to see a lot of shows. In fact, I've done 8 or 9 shows about the toxic waste from Lahaina that's going to Oluwalu. Those are worth listening to. They're all worth listening to. Now, I have a guest today that I'm very excited about. You can see here this nice gentleman. He looks like a Hawaii guy. That's Paulo O'Brien. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Jason.
I have a quick story I'll tell you. I am in a men's group, and I've met some people. I had an interview on our show here. You guys remember who wrote a book called Focus Passion. And I met this guy, Paulo, and I thought, boy, this guy is really interesting and smart. And he gave us a book that he wrote called Intuitive Intelligence. And I started reading it. You ever read a book where you don't want to read it too fast because it'll go away and you're having so much fun reading it? You want to take it slow like a glass of wine, and every sentence, everything. Well, that's what this book did to me. And I thought, well, I'm going to share it with you guys. Intuitive Intelligence by Paul O'Brien. Tell me, Paul, I already know this answer. I thought I've been doing radio a long time, and I mentioned it, and you said, oh, yeah, I do a show. It's called Pathways, and I've been on for 40 years. 40 years?
Yeah.
You're 40 years old?
That's funny. Yeah, this is our 40th anniversary year. It's in Oregon. It's broadcast across Oregon and Southwest Washington, and it's called Pathways on KBOO. KBOO. Well, we have a hell of a Halloween show out.
Now, you also, of course, have it all up on out of your website, divination.com, so people can go up there.
Well, yeah, after I sold my business, I started a nonprofit called divination.com, and one of the charters of the nonprofit is to syndicate my radio show, which has always been a labor of love. It's volunteer, just like you guys here. And so we created we just publish it as a podcast, and it's on divination.com. All the last 300 interviews I've done are up on divination.com in the archive. So, yeah.
So you do it just like me. I put everything up so people can go back.
Right.
We don't know who's listening when we're live, but we do know that we have that resource available after. And it's just as meaningful if you see it afterward, unless you wanted to call in. We're actually a call-in, call-out talk show.
Oh,
what does
wow.
that mean? That means we have the possibility to have people call us here in the studio, which I rarely find people are using. And call out, meaning if we have an issue, I could call from the air and bug somebody, which is...
That's convenient.
I thought, call-in talk show is one thing, but if you can reach out to people while you're on the air, but then we'll,
You call that a lifeline? You give yourself a lifeline? Okay.
Well, it's really, I think that it's important that the community has a place to come on when they want and interact. The other radio stations may have what they have, but they don't cover what I'm talking about here, and the news media doesn't promote what we're doing, so I want to keep an open line to the community.
Sure.
Well, let me just tell you, Paul has a story. We all have stories. But when I heard his story, I said, wow. And I'm going to let him begin, kind of give us a little bit of a history, because you were there in Portland, and you weren't always a writer only. You had interests, and they overlapped with things that you were doing. Why don't you let people know?
Well, I grew up in the Bay Area, came of age during the Summer of Love.
I was actually there. I came visiting with my parents.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I had my first LSD trip in the panhandle of Golden Gate Park, and that's the same place I lost my virginity. So maybe that's TMI, but this is going back to the late '60s, and I was going to UC Berkeley, and I dropped out and became a marijuana salesman and moved to Oregon. And so I've lived in Oregon since 1970 until I moved to Maui a couple of years ago. And when I was living in Oregon, I got busted because I was in a house. This isn't in my book. This is my next book. But I was in a house that got raided because there was because there was a guy there who was selling LSD. And I'm sitting there, and I had just taken a hit of LSD 45 minutes earlier, and all of a sudden the house is overrun with police.
Wow.
And I had 6 hits in my wallet, and I ended up going to jail, tripping my brains out. Now, that's what you call a bad trip.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's amazing because of the way that some things that can seem like a nightmare can lead to the most beautiful outcomes. And so there I am. I'm in jail that night. The cops never knew that I had taken any psychedelics, but I was tripping my brains out. And in this cage with 40 other people, they all knew I was high as a kite, but I didn't. I thought I was having a dream. I thought I actually was having a nightmare. It was so unbelievable. I had a hard time processing reality, as you might imagine. And so there I am. Now, I had been bugging this friend of mine to get me a job at a computer center. Now, this is in 1973. And my friend was a programmer for a nonprofit computer center that was tied to the University of Oregon, and they were doing quantitative research or something like that. And they were using ARPANET, which was the very earliest iteration of the Internet. So this is right after the Internet was invented. And my friend who was the programmer had, he was making software for data communications, very high-tech stuff. But we would go in this computer center in the middle of the night, and he would commandeer this $150,000 mini computer, which would take up half this building. It was like huge mag tapes and had like one tiny little monitor the size of an oscilloscope. And we would go in there and smoke some pot late at night and play this game that my friend had downloaded from MIT, and the game was called Space War. And we'd take over this little oscilloscope thing, and he had hooked up some what do you call it, joysticks, and we would play this game. Well, I'm not a gamer. I've never really been a gamer. I mean, it was fun, but I was blown away by the phenomenon of software because somebody at MIT had written some code that delivered this interactive, immersive experience.
Right.
And that was just an eye-opener for me. I started to have visions. I got very inspired by the phenomenon of software. Now, this is in '73. People didn't know what software was. It was not a word that was common. And but I was just fascinated by software and the potential of it. And even in '73 and '74, I started imagining that I thought it was kind of a form of wizardry, that you could write code and deliver an interactive experience. And so I started to imagine how it might be applied for educational reasons or even spiritual reasons. And I was spiritually inclined. I had just become a Buddhist after having grown up Catholic. And so when I was 20, I joined the Zen Society and that kind of thing. So I was interested in spirituality. But anyway, I started having visions of multimedia. Well, this was 20 years before CD-ROMs even existed. But I had this idea. And so I just wanted to be in the software business so bad because I just thought, wow, this is just awesome, magical stuff. And so I wasn't able to get a job there because I was a college dropout, and the director of computing, who was my friend's boss, I kept bugging him. I had hair down to here. I was a wild young man, and he, just didn't take me seriously. And then my friend Jack went to him after I got busted, and he goes, "Hey, my friend O'Brien needs a job really bad because otherwise he's liable to go to prison." And just for the record, my offense was illegal stimulation of the central nervous system against the peace and dignity of the state of Oregon.
Wow.
And my argument was, what does the state of Oregon know about stimulating the central nervous system? But anyway, he said, yeah, he's in trouble. And then Dan, the boss, said, well, what can he do? And my friend said, well, he types 70 words a minute. And Dan goes, oh, well, we need somebody to type up documentation for us. And so Dan went to court for me and got me off on probation after testifying that I was, fantastically useful to the computer center. And that's how this nightmare turned into my career in software. And so all of a sudden, I'm Dan's secretary. Well, I'm answering his phone calls. And one of the jobs of Dan as the executive director of the computer center was to sell the software that my friend Jack made. And so I started taking his calls, and then before you knew it, I started closing the deals for him. Oh, he loved that. And I was just like making his job that much more easy. And so he just invested in me. He just started taking me to trade shows and letting me learn the industry. And so I was there for a couple of years. I was making $660 a month. And I had hair down to here, like I said, and I'm barefoot. And half the time I didn't wear a shirt, but it was pretty casual. And so after I left that job, I promoted myself. We moved to Portland from Eugene. This was in Eugene. My girlfriend and I moved to Portland, and I promoted myself as a software marketing specialist. And I got a job, and all of a sudden I'm making $1,200 a month. And that was the beginning of my career in software marketing, which I did for the next 15 years. Well, back around the same time that I discovered software, which fascinated me, I became fascinated by another thing known as the I Ching, or some people pronounce it I Ching. It's an ancient Chinese Taoist classic that is also known as the Book of Changes, and it's a divination system. So you cast coins and you look up the reflection in a book relative to whatever was on your mind. It's kind of the tarot cards of China.
I remember that yellow book.
Yeah,
everyone
that's right.
got that yellow book
right.
translated. The book
that was the Princeton press version, the Wilhelm Baines version. Yeah, that's the one Carl Jung wrote the intro to.
Carl Jung, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever he was, had a friend named Wilhelm Bing.
No, well, he knew Wilhelm, and Wilhelm was the translator of the ancient I Ching, and somehow he recruited Carl Jung. I don't know the inside story.
Okay, so there they are years ago, and you started getting
1951 was when Jung wrote that introduction, yeah.
So here you are, you're now interested in the I Ching.
I was totally fascinated by the I Ching. Here I am, an undergrad at UC Berkeley. This is before I dropped out. And this cute girl that I was flirting with shows me this system for answering questions, and I thought, oh, well, this is some kind of flaky fortune-telling system, but she's cute, and I was interested in her, so I kind of played along with it, and she said, okay, well, why don't you write down a question, and we'll see what happens. And so I wrote down a question that didn't mean anything to me because I was a smart aleck. I thought being a smart aleck was the way to get girls. I've learned better since then. But in any case, I cast the coins, and I'm kind of making fun of the whole thing. Well, it comes back with hexagram number 4, which is entitled Youthful Folly, and which goes on to say, the student lacks respect for the teacher. I thought, whoa, it's making fun of me. And so I said, let me try this again. So my intent was different the second time. My question still was BS, but my intent was, well, let's test this thing. Let's see what happens. So I tested it, and it comes back with a reading that says, questioning the sincerity of the seeker. And I thought, oh, now it's testing me. So first I make fun of it. It makes fun of me. I test it. It tests me. I became hooked, and I became a student of the I Ching at the age of 19. And that was that was a huge fascination for me. And I used it for my entire adult life. And I have used it for my entire adult life to just give me another input into big decisions.
And I understand when you talk about I Ching, some people think of it as something that's going to see the future. But divination system doesn't only mean that.
That's right. In fact, that's a misunderstanding that people have about divination. And I've written a book on it called Divination, and I've got a chapter in my book, Intuitive Intelligence, on divination. And I define divination as a technique to stimulate the intuition to think outside the box around problems that logic can't handle. So it's not meant to give you a definitive answer or a definitive prediction, although it can be used for advice or even for some predictive intelligence. But the primary application of it, in my view, is insight that, or the way that it stimulates your intuition to think outside the box, which is where insight comes from. So I kind of understood that from the get-go, and I became, a devotee of the I Ching. So here I am, I'm fascinated by the I Ching, and then I get fascinated by software, and go forward about 17 years, and I'm in the late 80s, I'm the executive for a software company. I'm the VP of marketing, and it was a very high-tech company. And I found myself using the I Ching more often than usual. Like I said, I used it my whole adult life, but never too much. It wasn't like I wasn't one of these people that was casting the I Ching every day and, just to make every decision. But I only used it when I had a decision that logic couldn't handle. If logic can handle it, logic is a great tool. And I was pretty well educated, even though I dropped out of college. I went to an incredible high school. I was very well educated. I had good critical thinking skills.
And you were not just an average student. You were an excellent student.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I got a 4.0 every year I was in school. But when I dropped out of Cal, they had the whole school was on strike. It was during the People's Park period, and I thought, wow, man, school is the slowest way to learn anything. And I won every scholarship, but the state of California wouldn't give me any money because my father made enough money, and so my family didn't have financial need, even though I had financial need. My father wasn't helping me. I had 6 younger siblings that he was putting through Catholic school, so I'm working my way through college. I worked my way through high school, Jason. My father put me in a private Catholic high school, which I hated, and then he informs me, I want you to get a job after school and pay your own tuition. So I worked my way through high school, and I got 4.0. And then all of a sudden, I thought I'd get some scholarship money, but I couldn't. I got a little bit from the Bank of America and a couple of other awards, but all of a sudden I'm working my way through college, and then half the school's on strike, and I totally support the strike. So I just said, to hell with this, and I dropped out and joined a commune in the Sierra Nevadas, and then moved to Oregon. And had a commune there in Eugene, Oregon. So yeah. But anyway, getting back to when I was working high tech in the late 80s, I was so unhappy because the management of the company was brutal. The owner was an engineer who had never worked for anybody in his life. He had an inheritance, and he made Steve Jobs look like an easy guy to work for. Or maybe Elon Musk, and he was kind of like Elon Musk, but not nearly as rich. But in any case, it was really a brutal place to work, and I became the scapegoat because I was the marketing guy. Yeah, sure. I was the only one with the right brain, and they blamed me when they would make these cockamamie products that nobody wanted, but it was my fault because I couldn't sell it, because I should be able to sell anything. And then it was pretty bad. So I was thinking about leaving, but there weren't a lot of software marketing jobs in Portland at the time, and I was making good money, probably about $80K or something. And so it wasn't an easy thing to walk away from.
Sure.
So I found myself bringing the I Ching to work just to get me through the day, just to help me survive the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. When you think about Taoist wisdom, it's kind of like the martial arts. There's 3 ways that you can approach any conflict or any problem. You can assert yourself and be aggressive, or you can run like hell, you can retreat, or you can do nothing and let the dark clouds pass. So you have these three options, and that's basically what the I Ching will tell you if you're facing some situation like that, which one of those three things to do in so many words. And so it was helping me get through the day and helped me maintain my peace of mind. But finally I had had enough. But because it was very awkward, bringing that big yellow book to work, finding a private space where engineers aren't going to encroach on my space, and doing this thing during the day at work was pretty awkward. And so all of a sudden one day a light bulb went off, and I thought, boy, I sure wish I could do this on my computer. We were an early Macintosh company, and Macintosh was a graphical computer, and I thought, wow, maybe there's a way we could add art and some sounds, or maybe a little soundtrack, And so those visions of multimedia that I had in 1973 came back, and I realized that this intersection between software and the I Ching was a very interesting idea. Two of my fascinations, and I thought, oh, I want to see if this could work. And so I took my life savings, which at that point was about $50,000. I'd been making a lot of money, and I was a single father, but I took my life savings and I created a prototype. I hired a programmer and an artist, and I created one of the very earliest multimedia programs. Now, there were no CD-ROMs yet, but you had to load a bunch of floppies and put all this art in. It was very cumbersome, but it worked, and I thought, wow, this is awesome. I figured out a way to cast the hexagram using a mouse and a keyboard as opposed to coins and sticks, and it worked. And it was based on your timing. I won't go into too many of the details, but it was energetically authentic. It wasn't a random number generator. It actually, your energy was what determined what lines came up, and you had the 6 lines. And I have an app right now called the Visionary I Ching for the iPhone and or for Android, which is using the same algorithm for the casting of the coins. So I figured out a way to make it energetically authentic, and then I wanted to make it experientially authentic. I wanted it to be, like a ritual space where you could go. So I created this art of a Japanese garden, and we put in some sounds, and I asked my programmer, I said, I would like to hear some frogs croaking, because there was like a creek and a waterfall. And I said, is there any way you can give me a random frog croak? And he goes, geez, I don't know. And so he figured out how to do that. He went out on the campus of Reed College and taped some Pacific tree frogs, and then he figured out how to make them croak randomly in the software. So I remember when I came out with that program and we got it into Egghead software, it had, it said featuring random frogs, TM. So I trademarked random frogs, and I always just say, the only software in the industry that's got random frogs. And we put a little rubber frog in the box. We were having fun. It's like my motto, the company's, I called it Visionary Software, and the motto was creative freedom through vision and humor. And that was basically my calling card. And I never expected it to make a lot of money, but I was in love. I was doing what I love, and eventually I left my company, and I continued to do some moonlighting for them as an international marketing consultant, because Apple was sending me to all the Macworld shows all over the world because of our high-tech stuff. And so I continued to do that for the company just because I needed a source of income. And but then I created my little, that's how I became an entrepreneur. I was like the most accidental entrepreneur. Never imagined it was going to become lucrative. I just wanted to see if I could pay my rent doing something cool. That was my definition of creative freedom at the time. Well, now, to make a long story short, I pretty much starved for the next 13 years, but I kept it together, and we went into some more mainstream stuff because there was no market for I Ching software in 1989. I mean, people who bought software were accountants and engineers, and they were all male. They didn't care about the I Ching. They didn't know what it was. They could care less. So there wasn't much of a market. It did become a little bit of a cult favorite, but it never made a lot of money. And then I met this tarot expert through my radio show, and she said, what do you do? Are you in radio? And I go, no, this is volunteer. But Yeah, no, she said, what do you do? I said, well, I have this quirky little software company. I make this I Ching program. She goes, what? I Ching software? That's amazing. She goes, why don't you do a tarot card program? And I go, well, I don't really know the archetypes of tarot. I know there's 78 cards, but I don't really know that much about that. I know it's the same principle. It's the synchronicity principle operating on a set of archetypes. Same thing as the I Ching. But I don't know. She goes, well, I do. I just wrote a book on it, as you know. I go, yeah, that's true. She goes, well, why don't we do it together? So then created a tarot card, do-it-yourself tarot card reading software, which by then CD-ROMs had come around, and we put it on a CD-ROM. And it was authentic. It was energetically authentic because what you would do is it would lay out, you could shuffle the cards using the mouse, and this computer would shuffle them. But then you lay them out on the screen flat, like you might lay them out on a table here. And then, like you might use your finger, you use the mouse to pick your 7 cards or 11 cards, whatever spread you wanted. And that's how you got your cards. So you were picking your own cards. It wasn't like a psychic friend who was, making stuff up. And so that was my second product. And then the internet came along, and I'm trying to sell those things through e-commerce. And so I learned about e-commerce. Well, I had a leg up when it came to e-commerce because back when I was a marketing executive in the 80s, I was doing direct mail. That was our primary way of selling stuff. We put ads we did put some ads in the Macintosh magazines, but mostly we got these mailing lists through those magazines, and we did direct mail. And so then I became really good at that direct marketing function, and that was really kind of my core competency. So then when email and web pages came along, wow, that was like a wet dream for a direct marketer. I couldn't believe it. And so I knew exactly what to do. And so I jumped on the e-commerce bandwagon and used email and web pages to do the same thing I had done with direct mail, but a lot more efficiently and without killing a lot of trees in the process. And so that was going okay. I was, the company was making a couple $100,000 a year, which isn't much, and we had like 5 employees. And but then one day I asked my programmer, I said, could you put like a little multimedia sampler on the website? And he said, yeah, but it was really slow. The speeds, remember when in the early days of AOL and all of that, you had these low baud rates, they call it. And but he put up something that was kind of interesting. Oh my God, people started banging on that sampler like crazy, but they wasn't increasing the sales of CD-ROMs. Well, women don't want to buy CD-ROMs. They don't want to install software. It's too technical for them. If they don't have, or for most people, but if they don't have a teenage son, they're just not interested. But they were quite amenable to this internet thing. So I said, hey, we're in the internet business, whether we want to be or not. And so I said, okay, we're going to have to convert this to a pay-to-play type of thing on the internet. Do-it-yourself I Ching readings, do-it-yourself tarot card readings for $5 a piece, $10 a piece, whatever. And we did that, and I didn't know if that was going to go or not. But one of the problems was it's very hard to charge a credit card $3. It's called a micropayment. It's very hard to charge a credit card $5 because they had a minimum $1.85 minimum charge to the bank or whatever. And so I created a microcurrency. I was an early pioneer in that realm. I called them karma coins. And you could buy karma coins in quantity, and I'd give you discounts. And so that was a way that you could just use a few of them for a really inexpensive reading product. And that seemed to be working out okay. After we'd done that for a few months, New Year's was coming, and I told my staff, I said, I want to give everybody in our database, and we probably had like 50,000 people at that point, 50 karma coins for New Year's, just as a gift, with a personalized email to each one of them, blah, blah, blah. And I said to my staff, so this is going to hit our sales numbers for a week or so. Oh, Jason, I was so wrong. Our sales like immediately tripled. We gave people 50 karma coins, they'd spend them, and then they'd buy more. So it was kind of like I had an arcade. I'd say, here's some tokens, find your favorite game, and then when you run out, you can buy more. And they did. So I couldn't believe it. So I started, it was like Johnny Appleseed. So then I started giving people karma coins for their birthday, because we knew their birthdays because we were dabbling with astrology, and I'd give people 100 karma coins on their birthday. Oh shit! You know, there was at one point I was giving people, shucks. At one point I was giving people like, I don't know, like, thousands of people every day. I was giving a birthday present to because we got it up to millions of people. And then AOL affiliated with it, and then we got a lot of traffic that way. They put it in their astrology section, in their horoscope section. And then I had the bright idea, well, we should add horoscopes to our collection. So then I created a horoscope section and an astrology section. We had the domain name tarot.com, which is another really fun story. But then I captured the franchise with AOL and became their exclusive provider of horoscopes and divination. Wow. Yeah. And then all hell broke loose. But you know what? In order to become AOL's provider for a free horoscope, you had to guarantee AOL 50% of your revenues or $500K a year, whichever was greater, for the privilege of giving them free content, which I'm paying somebody to write. Wow. That's how backwards it is, but that's how valuable traffic was. And I was kind of taken aback. I thought, well, I'm giving you free content. You should pay me. You should pay me a royalty or a stipend or something. But no, au contraire, it was just the other way around. And then I had to think, well, we're only making $250K a year, and I got to pay AOL $500K, but they let me pay it by the quarter. And so that was another year of having nightmares about going bankrupt. But lo and behold, we made $600K that first year. And then after that, it just blew the doors off. And my company was running what became the world's largest astrology website. It was AOL horoscopes, and then we got Yahoo horoscopes also. All of a sudden, we've got 10 million registered users. We're making $10 million in sales of e-commerce. It was amazing. After going all those years, I didn't get paid half the time for 12 years. And after going all those years, all of a sudden, I'm making 7 figures. And we're being pursued for acquisition by large media companies that wanted our traffic. They wanted this cash machine. We had this vending machine in the sky delivering these readings, and it could never run out, and there was no cost of goods. I mean, I paid royalties to the astrologers and to the tarot lady, but it was a most amazing business. And we didn't have to worry about piracy or people stealing. It wasn't like ebooks, It's sort of like, because your astrology report is unique to you. We wanted you to share it. In fact, if you shared it through email, we gave you 10 karma coins for doing that. So we would give people karma coins for signing up. We gave it for their birthday. We gave it for sharing. It was really, we were just having so much fun. And I wasn't even thinking about selling the company. I never had an exit strategy. And so, Disney came up to talk to us because they have a bunch of websites for women. Barnes & Noble was interested in acquiring my company. And I just said, oh, thank you. It's very flattering. Appreciate the attention, but we're having fun and we're making a lot of money. So no thanks. And then I started thinking about it. I thought, well, what would I do if I did sell the company and I got my number, enough money to live off of for the rest of my life, which was something I never imagined. Sure. When I started out. And so I said, okay, well, I'm open to offers going forward. And we ended up selling, we were making $10 million in revenues, and we sold the company for a multiple of that. And
the rest is history.
Yeah. And then I started the nonprofit.
Did you use the I Ching to give you, obviously got some insight?
Oh, for sure. For sure. In fact, I used the I Ching to decide whether to make a software version of it. And I got the hexagram enthusiasm turning into breakthrough. So that was encouraging. So that's kind of, then I went for it. And then selling the company, the same thing. It's just like, yeah, I've used it for every major decision. I don't depend on it, but it gives me another point of reference.
Especially when it, like you say, it's a trigger to help someone use their innate intuition, which is why this book is such a terrific book.
Right.
Because you pull all the different things together in this book.
Right. That book is about decision making. I call it visionary decision making, and it's about how to combine logic and intuition in order to make the best possible decision for yourself. Because most people are terrible at decision making. You know, you'd think that human beings would be great at this. You know, we have so much information, and you'd think in this day and age of access to unlimited information, we would be great decision makers. But au contraire, you know, we suck at decision making. We're either too emotional or we're over rational.
Or well, you know, I've found I get all excited about something, but as I'm reading your book with, that's a good thing to remind you. You may not be on the right path. You really need to look past that.
Oh, there's so many ways to make bad decisions. And it becomes really difficult to access your intuition when you need it the most. That's the irony of it. You know, when you need it the most is when you're stressed out, or when you're facing a very stressful decision, or when you're confused. You know, it's very, or you're afraid. You know, it's very difficult to access intuition when you're emotionally overwrought. And so that's what this book helps you do, is to get out of your own way. You know, there's all these different ways of getting out of your own way. And I do have a chapter on divination in there, but intuitive intelligence doesn't hinge on using divination. It's just a tool that I found helpful. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in there about how to settle down, how to let go of thinking. You know, there's some stuff on mindfulness and meditation.
And I have to laugh. You gave me a book, but because I have such challenge with my eyes and reading, I was up to like page 141, and I thought, I've got to do something to be able to get this book. So I bought the Kindle version, and I'm having it read to me. It was, you know, I want to get through the book and all that, but I tell you, the insights that you lay out through the first part of the book, I was like just totally captivated by every sentence. It's like, wait, I think I want to think about that one. It wasn't like you were trying to get a concept that's coming at the end and building up. Each bit of it was just so rich.
Well, I started out talking about some of the lesser understood principles of psychology that were explicated by Carl Jung, the synchronicity principle and the collective unconscious, you know, and how we can tap into these things. So this is a book on how to recognize and leverage synchronicity.
Yeah. I have just been, I don't want it to end. You're going to have to write it.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that, because that's the only reason I wrote it, was just to offer it to people. I give away a lot of copies of this book, and I'm really happy to do that.
Well, and it's funny, when I met you and we were around the group of really interesting guys, but I noticed this guy, Paulo, he's really got a leg up on just an average guy, and he just really, just the wisdom that came out of you as you were speaking, I just was interested. So when I got your book, I just didn't want to put it down.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
And then I got to know you, and I said, this is a terrific guy, so down to earth, like one of us. It's funny. Oh. There's a gentleman he passed away. His name was Reverend Jimmy Kimmel, and he was here for years. He was a student of the Urantia book. When you talked about Golden Gate Park, Time magazine had a couple that got married in Golden Gate Park naked in that year, and that's when he lost his inheritance, a huge farm with his father just disinherited him.
Oh God.
But San Francisco and Golden Gate Park and that whole experience was like a doorway into.
Oh, it was amazing.
Really an amazing thing.
It was a period in history that'll never recur, I don't think. You know, it was between. Well, the sexual revolution was between the pill and the plague, between the birth control pill and AIDS. There was this period in history that was like nothing before or since. It was an amazing time. And it was an amazing time for sharing, too. It's sort of like, you know, if you had long hair and you were hitchhiking, you get a ride just like that, and people would take you home and feed you, you know, no questions. It was the the brotherhood and the solidarity. And you could leave your backpack on campus at Sproul Plaza and nobody would steal it. It's hard to even imagine that kind of thing now.
It's not sad.
And I remember in '68, I was going to the University of San Francisco, which is right near Golden Gate Park, and and there was a concert every Sunday at Speedway Meadows in Golden Gate Park. Grateful Dead, Jefferson Starship, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and a couple of other, Moby Dick, and a couple of other huge.
Well, the ones you mentioned, are icons in our culture, right?
Yeah, and so they gave a free concert every Sunday morning at Speedway Meadows in Golden Gate Park. 10,000 people or more would be there, half of them naked, half of us tripping on acid. Those were the days. Wow.
I can see that happening here in Maui, right?
Yeah. I think Maui has tried to keep that spirit alive probably more than anywhere.
We have a very new age, I want to say new age. That culture really lives here in Maui. It's an amazing, Maui is an amazing place, as many of you know. But I'm so thrilled to have you here. So here you had this book, that's after the fact. You had just retired, you started your nonprofit, you're continuing your radio show. You introduce and speak with all kinds of authors because you focus on books, huh?
Well, mostly authors. I've had Ramdas. I had Ramdas on there a couple times before his stroke. I've had, Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, John Gray. We've had really big names on my show, but then a lot of just people that are doing really good things. But mostly authors, and it's I get my producer gets a book a week from a publishing house that's publishing books in the self-help or the spiritual or the psychological category, which is our beat. The theme of the show is personal development and cultural evolution, and that's the theme of the book too, and that's the theme of the nonprofit. So that's what I care about. So it's just sort of like I'm just propagating what I'm passionate about. But we don't have a huge audience, and I'm not trying to amass a lot of followers. I don't mind, but it's not, I'm not making money off of my YouTube channel. I don't need to make money anymore. I'm just trying to give back in my own way without compromising myself by this relentless pursuit of success and fortune. And since the pandemic,
what a beautiful freedom that is, huh?
No, that's creative freedom. See, I never imagined creative freedom meant that. When back in the day it meant, being able to pay the rent, doing something that I liked, So yeah, no, I have so much creative freedom now. And since the pandemic, everybody and his sister's got a podcast. So, and everybody's just hustling for followers. And some people are making a lot of money. But I just wasn't motivated to compete for attention in that arena. But I just continue to do my thing. And like you, here we are. We're both veterans of...
I don't have that creative freedom thing down yet.
Well, in some sense you do. I mean, you get to keep doing this.
I know, and every time I do a show, I think, well, that was a good show. People need to go up to the website and look through the archives of all these shows, because just like you say, you have great guests, and the content is rich, and it's just really been a great experience for me. But at 30 years, I feel like a rookie compared to you.
Oh, nonsense. I'm so happy to be here, Jason. I really admire you and appreciate your work.
Thank you. So when I think of this book, and I almost don't know where to start, because like you say, there's logical and then there's intuitive, and they really work together in an unusual thatched way that you identified. It was only on page 141 that I realized, hey, this Mankind Project, they base all the things they're doing based on this book and these archetypes. This guy knows about archetypes. My goodness.
Yeah, I've got a whole chapter on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when I think of people out there in the world, what if you had general advice for someone? Do you have any general advice? I know you get specific.
Well, I think it depends on what your stage of life is. What general advice would be most relevant or applicable? This book is for people that are, I think mainly relevant to people that are looking to make some life-changing decisions, maybe go on a different path, or maybe discover their true purpose. And so, I mean, the advice that I would give people like that is take the risks that grow you. It's like when I became an entrepreneur, oh my God, it was so risky, but it didn't feel, it felt good because I was going to be doing something that I loved. It was basically coming from love. I wasn't even money motivated. I mean, I've always appreciated money because nobody's ever given me any, and it's important to pay the rent, and it's important to be responsible. And I was a single parent, so I had in the 80s I had financial needs, but take the risks that grow you. And so when I took the risk to start becoming an entrepreneur, I thought, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, this is not going to work. I'm going to fail at this, but I will have learned a lot, and I will have explored areas of my personal fascination, and I could always go back to doing what I was doing and make a living in the high-tech industry. So that was my only safety net. I used all my savings to make the prototype. I had no family money. I had no investors. I didn't have a line of credit. It was a super risky thing to do, but it grew me. It was a way of growing myself. So I encourage people to do that. But at the same time, I would say, don't forget your day job. A day job is a blessing. When I started, my day job was doing marketing consulting, and I needed that. I needed the income. I know all kinds of people, especially young people these days, they just don't want to do anything that they don't love doing. And I don't blame them. I mean, everybody wants to make a living doing what they love, but very few people are able to pull that off. There's karma involved. I don't know what accounts for it. And so I always tell them, hey, don't disparage your day job. Thank God you have a day job. And, if you really want to be successful at anything, you're going to have to work your ass off. I put in 70-hour weeks for 25 years. Well, I did a lot of things I didn't really feel like doing. I didn't really feel like doing software sales for high tech. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was any kind of moral issue or an ethical problem with it, but it just didn't excite me. It didn't turn me on. So I tell people that, but I think as we get older, I'm becoming more and more I've always been spiritually inclined, but I'm becoming more tuned in to the spiritual side of life. And I'm realizing, hey, I'm in my 70s. I'm not going to live forever. And so I want to be ready. I want to be ready to die when the time comes. I want to just sort of like let go and not struggle with it. So I'm kind of like paying attention to contentment and to being at inner peace. So I'm focusing on those kinds of things rather than trying to figure out, okay, what can I do now? How can I top that? How can I top what I did before? This is the same problem that people have after they've hit some pinnacle of success. Like Jack Nicholson, the movie star, or some rock band or whatever. How can I top what I did? I already, made gazillions of dollars, and I, got the Academy Award, and I, that kind of thing. And so a lot of times they're lost. They don't know what to do. And I'm kind of struggling with that myself right now. I was trying to figure out what's the best thing? What's the best way that I can contribute going forward? And so, and I've kind of just figured out, I'm just becoming more spiritually inclined, more in tune with, I'm a Buddhist, so I meditate every day, and I do a lot of study in that arena because I want to be at peace. I want to embrace death. I don't want to try to live forever. I want to be healthy until I die. But so it's a different stage of life.
I must say, I'm in your 70s bracket myself. You're a couple of years ahead of me only. And I know that I feel like the way things are going, we may be here till 120. So, what used to be, people in their 70s were considered old, and 80s.
Right.
I have a girlfriend in the 80s. I was like, what? How's that possible? But you met her. She's beautiful.
Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah.
So I've had, a real appreciation that life keeps changing. I think that anyone and everyone that sees this book should be reading it. And, it was only a week before that I even met you that I happened to buy online this little Visionary I Ching program. And then when you were introduced as Paulo, and I thought, that's interesting. And Paul O'Brien, oh, wow. That really got me.
There's one other piece of general advice that I'm giving myself these days and I'm putting forth for everybody, and that is cease to cherish opinions. It's an ancient Zen proverb, because in Buddhism, all of your beliefs are opinions, just current operating assumptions. And one of the things that's happening today with all of this polarization is people are so self-righteous about whatever their beliefs happen to be. And I think that's like a huge mistake. I think we need to question ourselves. I think we need to test our beliefs. I think we need to stop believing what our ego wants to believe. And this is a test. I think I talk about it in the book. I don't remember. This test that I always do is I always ask myself, well, I actually have a chapter on belief engineering at the back of the book, chapter 11. And I always ask myself, why would my ego want to believe that? And I see this behind conspiracy theories where people who just latch on to conspiracy theories of all types. There's a lot of ego in that. They want to believe that they're onto something, that they know that they have some kind of inside information or some kind of special knowledge, and it makes them feel special. It makes them feel right, and they're willing to fight for that. That's just crazy. It's sort of like we're all bozos on this bus. What makes you think you're so smart that you're not going to trust the experts because you're smart?
And that's not to, what's that expression? Sometimes we can honestly say those conspiracy theories are actually truth, which means you've got to do some digging and ciphering and have your own opinion.
Yeah.
Draw your own conclusions.
There are conspiracies. There are definitely conspiracies.
Where I learned that one, this COVID thing. When the Robert F. Kennedy, whenever he was called, when you actually go back and do research, and you discover that we haven't really heard the truth, and the media does its own movie to the point where conspiracy, well, where and what, we don't know.
Yeah, but one thing I would say in defense of mainstream media is they are fact-checking each other like crazy. That's not happening on the internet. That's not happening in social media. It's just a bunch of competing opinions. I don't, it's hard for me, on the COVID thing. Yeah, a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of mistakes were made for sure. And a lot of mistakes are going to be made in any arena.
The only reason I'm even bringing it up is we have this Lahaina wildfire.
Right.
We had a guest on here who was talking about he was working for Kodak, and then he came out here to work, and he was in charge of pointing a laser at a satellite. And this was all military, and the possibilities of things that are outside of our awareness. Or someone talks about ETs, and you think they're crazy until you hear the story, and it's been corroborated. So it's the whole world is you got to check what you're doing. It's crazy. That's that fuzzy area of life, I've done shows about Olawalo and the toxic dumping. Mm-hmm. We're going to have a guy here next week who was on before, Eddie Garcia. And what's going on here and the choices made by the EPA and stuff. There's a lot of things. It sounds like conspiracy until you dig down a little bit and you realize, wow, this is really, it's larger than a bread box, so it's an interesting life we live. So I am just so happy to have had you on my show.
Thank you.
I hope you'll think to come back again.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun talking to you.
Thank you. We only have about 1:14 seconds. Now let's see how the thing will work here in a minute when I play the software. Anything that you got on your notes you said, I don't want to forget to tell them about, anything on your mind that you'd like to deliver here or talk about?
Well, I just want to encourage people to keep the faith, in the goodness of life. This is something I'm struggling with. It's really easy to feel like a victim. It's really easy to look for somebody to blame for things that are happening. And I think we need to just cool our jets and accept and let go of trying to control stuff.
And be grateful for what we have.
Yes, absolutely.
We're running out of time, but I want you to remember intuitive intelligence. Go up there and the Visionary I Ching program. All really super.
Divination.com if you want to check out the
You'll
podcast.
See it there on the screen. Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us.